From the basement of the beautiful Chrysler building, where they let Oso, the scam-sniffing dog, in with no questions asked. This is the Scammies. For each episode, we look at a scam. What's a scam? It's a trick, a ploy designed to separate you from your money. And our job is to make you a little bit smarter so they don't get any of your money. I'm your host, Michael Robertson. And this episode is a great one. It starts off as a real-life risky business and ends up with the youngest person ever sentenced for a Ponzi scheme by the federal government. Our scammy goes to Ian Bick. Ian Bick lives in Danbury, Connecticut, and he's a likable, popular, very ambitious 15-year-old. You know, the kind that goes to theater camp, but not the geek kind, the popular kind. He's the school vice president, even on the homecoming court. Didn't drink and didn't smoke. Doesn't even party, but likes planning parties. But he's got a rebellious streak underneath it all. Likes to pull pranks with his best friend, Steven. And one night, they're upset because the president has outlawed golf carts in their community neighborhood. And that's how they got around. As 15-year-olds, they couldn't drive real cars. So they sneak out and encapsulate the president and vice president's car in insulating foam, which is a fantastic prank if I don't say so myself, but it was not appreciated. He was later arrested and sentenced to community service. And as part of the community service, he had to work for a charity. So what he starts doing is selling those little bracelets. Remember the Lance Armstrong bracelets? To help the homeless. That was his job. Only he's ambitious and says, you know what? I can do better than bracelets. Let's plan a dance party. He goes to his principal and says, I want to put on a dance party to help the homeless. The principal says, we have enough. With the prom and this and that, we've got enough. So he goes off campus and finds a place that will rent him out, and he plans a party, and it's a huge hit. He turns it into a nightclub with fake bouncers and even a bar that served non-alcoholic drinks. And he uses Facebook as a marketing tool, and this was the earliest days of Facebook, and it's packed a huge success. In fact, the venue operator says, hey, how old are you, kid? He says, I'm 15. He'll be 16 in 3 months. He says, when you turn 16, you come back with me because I'm going to give you a job planning events. But in the meantime, our buddy Ian decides he's going to plan house parties. He's going to let people in for free and then charge them $5 for unlimited drinks. He's running a modern day risky business. Remember that movie, 1983? Rebecca De Mornay and Tom Cruise, the teen sex comedy? Well, that's what he was doing in real life. And it was a huge success. Had to evade the parents, though. And eventually, he decided, I've got to graduate from house parties and go out to more professional venues. And so that's what he does. He goes out, rents a venue for $1,000, sells tickets for $10 to 1,000 students, and makes $2,000 profit. He says, this is the business I want to do. And about that time, an older friend, Matt, comes in and says, you know, I could get Wiz Kahlifa. You know Wiz Kahlifa, the rapper? And we could put on a concert with Wiz Kahlifa, but it's going to cost a lot of money. He's going to want more than $100,000. And Ian says, well, I don't have $100,000. Now Ian is 17, says, I don't have $100,000. I'm going to have to try to raise it from my friends. They had seen him making money with his house parties. So he goes out seeking investors from friends and friends' parents, but the money's not coming in. He needs $100,000 for Wiz Kahlifa. So he changes the contract that he had drafted up that said, I will guarantee you your money back. Wow, no risk. Suddenly the money starts pouring in. He raises $150,000. But there's a problem. Matt, who promised he could get Wiz Kahlifa, can't get Wiz Khalifa. Ian calls an emergency meeting with all of his investors at his parents' house and says, hey, we can't get Wiz Khalifa. Do you want your money back? Or do you want to leave it with me because I have a new plan to put on 4 smaller shows? About half the people ask for their money back, half the people leave their money in. So he's got $60,000 and he puts on 4 shows. But these shows are marketing to college kids and he's still in high school. He doesn't have the connections and they don't turn a profit. He only makes about $30,000 of the $60,000 that people have invested with him. And remember, he's promised to pay it back. He's got a big problem. He needs to raise some money. So he goes to his pot-smoking friend and says, hey, where can I get some money? And they introduce him to some local drug dealers, just the small-time guys, who offer to give him 30 grand, but they want 50% interest in 3 weeks. Feeling like he has no choices, he takes him up on the deal. About this time, one of his other friends comes and says, you know what? I've got a great deal selling electronics. I can get Beats headphones for $50 and we can sell for $400. And I can get Otter boxes. Now Ian says, how do you get Beats for $50? And his friend says, well, these ones fell off the truck. Now, if you're a little more experienced than Ian, you know that means something's really shady. But he didn't care because he was in a jam. So he starts selling electronics. And for a short time, it's actually profitable. But then the defective, low-quality ripoffs that he's selling start falling apart. And with that, his business crumbles. And by this time, he had taken money to invest in his wholesale business to pay back the drug dealers. And what he did is he also promised them 50% interest in 3 weeks, just like he had promised the drug dealers. And this didn't feel wrong to him. This was a loan. This wasn't a Ponzi scheme. Ian thought the business was going to work. But it was clear the electronics business was not going to work. About this time, one of his old friends from the concert business, if you can have an old friend when you're 17, comes to him and says, Ian, I have a big idea for a big concert series. We know what we did wrong with the small concert series. We didn't think big enough. So Ian decides, yeah, let's do it. And he raises $700,000 to put on a massive concert series targeting college kids. It's going to be huge. Focusing on EDM music, which is just starting off at this time. So he raises all this money and he's starting to pay back his old investors with the new investors, which of course is a Ponzi scheme. And he's also starting to misappropriate some of the money too. He spent about $100,000 on dinners, jet skis, clothes, even a kids' shoe company and a website. Oh, and did I mention a gambling problem? Yeah, it's all falling apart. But he starts doing the concerts, and they're successful, but not quite enough to pay everyone back. Desperate now, because now he's promising $700,000, he goes to a local attorney and says, hey, here's the situation. I need help. And that attorney decides, well, we've got to send letters to all your investors saying, hey, if you already have your principal back, you're not going to get any more money. And if I promised you money and you haven't got it yet, you're not going to get it. And investors are irate, and they go to the local police. And they also go to the postal inspector because Ian had sent them letters. And the postal investors show up at Ian's house and interview him and later arrest him. And he's charged with 11 counts of wire fraud, punishable by 20 years for each count, 3 counts of money laundering, punishable by 10 years, and 1 count of making false statements to federal law enforcement, which was the postal inspectors he did talk to. He gets sentenced to 3 years in prison, and this is federal prison, so there's no time off for good behavior. And he goes to prison. He's out now and working as an assistant manager at Whole Foods, and he's promised to work on the straight and narrow. In fact, he wants to sell his story for TV show rights and pay everyone back that he owes money to. And so what's our lesson here? Well, I think first lesson is be careful when you're investing in a 17-year-old. I know there's all the stories about the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, but more often than not, you're going to have an inexperienced person who's going to set that money on fire. Another lesson is if they're promising your principal back or interest in 3 weeks at 50%, that's a scam. No further investigation required. And one more lesson here. Don't talk to the police. Remember, they can lie to you, and if you lie to them, they can charge you with a crime. That's this episode of The Scammies. If there's a scam you want me to look into, drop me an email address. It's in the description. Please leave your comments. I'd love to hear them, love to read them, and definitely hit that subscribe button so you never miss another episode of The Scammies. Thanks for watching.
How the hell did you get so fine? You wake me from a dream in the middle of the night. Damn, I could use some sleep. I've been thinking about you, how much you think about me. I love the way your skin glow, you should